18 years, and we turned the receipts of childhood trauma and destitution into prison bars and desolate futures. They once laid in their mother's womb, shielded, nestled, nurtured. A cocoon birthed a butterfly, forced to be grounded. A caterpillar in reverse, revisit the trauma, put them back in the womb where it was safe and their mother's love shielded. Flashbacks, they told my daddy to lay that crack pipe down, but flashbacks to belt whippings to his backside and his father's grandfather's flashback to the whippings to his back and sides. Coping, unraveling into the white brick that leads to the sewer that they call poverty and leads to the school to prison pipeline. So I smoke this weed, hang out on corners past curfew, finding solace in joining gangs, and peace forgetting about my past, the same way you forgot about my past. I carry guns and shoot because probation is premeditation, and so is this hunger, and so is this addiction, and so is this grief, and so is this conviction, and so is this trauma, and so is this trauma, and so is this trauma. As a therapist, I find myself frequently sitting in sessions attempting to counter countertransference and emotional weight and barriers brought on by much of the dealings of many of my clients who are under the age of 18 years old and trapped within the Oklahoma juvenile justice system. I have personally experienced setbacks, stigmas, stereotypes, and spiteful outdated systems, and sought survival while in distress and battling trauma. But I have never come close to experiencing what my adolescent and teenage clients have experienced in the past, trying to make sense of their present while their future but a blur in the distance, full of uncertainties of I don't know. I can't think about that right now, and I'm just trying to see tomorrow. Many of my clients are parentless. Many of them are current or former gang members. Many of them are addicts. Many of them are homeless or without stable housing or basic needs such as food, water, and clothing. Almost all of them with trauma experiences, while most 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, along with their parents, are preparing for adulthood and their transition into the real world. Most of my clients are in the real world, parentless, preparing for the possibility of being bridged into an adult prison. The juvenile justice system isn't the solution, but the dilemma, in the same way you don't put your seatbelt on after a car accident or look for survivors prior to a plane crash. Many of the youth are being plagued by unprocessed trauma that is causing more trauma, and they are being punished with even more trauma. The solution to a problem isn't another problem created by the original problem. In order for the youth to heal from the trauma they feel trapped within, they'll need to resolve unpleasant thoughts and memories and feelings. I have a connection with the youth through our shared experiences and the environment in which we were raised. I find their stories both unique and worthy of an approach that is like a seed deeply planted in optimism and hopes of being nurtured into becoming a new living organism, or in this case, a new opportunity for change. I always knew that I wanted to be a pillar in creating that change. When I think back to my childhood trauma and how I never wanted an escape, but rather desired a path to healing, and sometimes we find that path in the ways we least expect it. My healing was enhanced and cultivated by the freedom of expression that I found by speaking my raw truth. The raw truth I found through writing, specifically poetry. My poetry helped decrease fear, sadness, and anger, and helped me find the words that have been silent for so long by the pain that it felt like a catastrophe. So I decided to take my love for poetry and my desire to help others through mental health and marry them in a way that supports, encourages, and promotes emotional resilience. Incorporating a therapeutic modality such as cognitive behavior therapy, where purpose meets less resistance and provides a voice to those who otherwise feel muted. It is a powerful combination of words, figurative language, self-expression, and freedom. It is a way to feel less trapped. At times, we are more willing to offer the youth the space to harm or hurt rather than the space to heal or evolve. That's why I developed a concept called T.R.A.P therapy, trauma, resilience, attainment, poetry therapy, which serves as a window into their emotional connection, development of identity, and the exploration of self beyond their current circumstances. The goals for T.R.A.P therapy is to confront trauma and to cultivate growth, healing, and hope. Using poetry in therapy isn't a new concept. The ancient Egyptians would write down words, dissolve them in liquids, and provide them to the unwell as a form of treatment. In the 1700s, in Pennsylvania, reading and expressive writing was used as a supplementary treatment at the first hospital established in the United States. In the early 20th century, Eli Griefer, a poet and a pharmacist, would provide poems to those filling prescriptions. It was his way of offering an additional treatment through poetry. Have you ever asked a gang member why they joined the gang? More than likely, they're going to tell you they joined the gang because they wanted to be a part of a family, or they needed protection, or they wanted to survive. Have you ever thought about asking an addict why they get high? Many have told me as an escape, to not feel, or to simply cope. And have you ever thought about asking someone who is suicidal why they want to die? Many of them don't want to die. They just don't want to hurt anymore. So what does a gang member, an addict, someone who is suicidal, someone who self-harms, someone who is homeless or without stable housing, or someone who is experiencing a debilitating mental illness have in common? More than likely, many of them are experiencing a significant amount of unprocessed trauma. And more than likely, many of them lack the tools and the understanding of how to heal. When it comes to the youth, we have many who are birthed into barriers blinded by plights that we bury, but we act surprised when the broken and blunted become sharp and bitter. We act surprised when they become jaded, and we act surprised when they become cold, calloused, and detached. To heal from trauma, we have to look at trauma from multiple perspectives, take in new data, and make sense of past experiences. When we are in the grips of trauma, we are in survival mode. This means our sympathetic nervous system will instinctively have us go through the stay and fight, the flee to save, or the freeze responses as methods of protection. To heal from trauma, we have to walk through trauma. This means we have to get in touch with our thoughts and feelings and unpack the conclusions that we created about our current selves, our experiences, and the world. When my clients are ready to process their trauma, I use T.R.A.P therapy to confront their traumatic events and to construct poems that elicit and express emotions and engage thoughts. We start by reading pre-existing poems to create a connection and an understanding of the literature. So I keep my clients' cognitive development in mind and reading level in mind. I select literature that is a representation or has an interconnection to my clients. While dissecting poems, we are analyzing themes, gaining an understanding of how language is arranged, comprehending rhythm and sound, structure, and discovering context. Clinically, once comfort is established, my clients are tasked with constructing their first poems unassisted. Essentially, my clients are in the beginning phases of confronting the traumatic event or events by utilizing deep poetic processing. It is important to remember that not every client is ready for this level of work, so it may be necessary to focus on the client coping with their symptoms as an alternative treatment. To summarize, my clinical goals for T.R.A.P therapy consist of development of creativity, increased self-esteem, growth found through the freedom of expression, the encouragement of change, the benefits of healthy coping skills, the improvement of communication and interpersonal skills, emotional regulation, and the gift of finding their voice through learned insights from past experiences. The truth is, it is going to take more than poetry to solve what I consider a crisis in communities being cleanly forgotten. The truth is, it is going to take more than poetry to resolve a life of tragedy that has been worn and exposed to poverty, abuse, violence, and drugs. We have many of the youth who are suffering and struggling in silence. And through poetry, I want each of them to tell their stories in their own words and release the adversity that they never asked for. The truth is, we're not doing enough to prevent childhood trauma. The truth is, we are not doing enough to prevent the youth from entering the juvenile justice system. And the truth is, we are not doing enough to prevent youth suicide ideations, suicide attempts, and suicide completions. What I'm offering to my clients isn't an escape, but the answers to the traumatic tests that life sometimes torments us with. I want each of them to connect and discover aesthetics and the exploration of beauty that this world can offer us sometimes. To some, or to many, they judge the youth entering the juvenile justice system by their extensive rap sheets, or their long history of criminal activities, or their symptoms, or their mental illnesses. And in many ways, they are disregarded until they are bridged into a far worse system, the prison system. I started my talk today with a poem that was inspired by my clients and the work that I do. I'm going to end my talk in the same fashion. I am waiting to be discovered, dealing in the dark. I feel it in my bones, lonely with greedy grief and blessings that feel broken. Today, I wrote nothing. I deserve to fly. I am a beacon of light, despite the cracks in my bones, resembling the cracks in the pavement, the cracks in my skull, the crack in my father's veins, generational trauma. I wonder how I still crack a smile. Sometimes I forget to smile. Sometimes I forget to be. But I can't be forgotten, but I won't be remembered. I dwell in the middle of what you forgot and what you gave up on, but I still need help. Happiness is in the distance. I am a beacon of light that needed you to see the rose growing from the cracks in the pavement, my desire to heal through the cracks in my smile, despite the cracks in my bones. I am dealing in the dark, and I am waiting to be discovered. Thank you, guys.